Good evening, everybody.
Hello.
It rained a little bit at our house.
Emerson, do you have a question? Emerson, if you can unmute yourself.
I'm sorry, this is Michael Monaco. I'm on the wrong account, but rename myself.
I will move you over.
Thank you.
We now have a new name for Michael. That's right. That's great.
There we go. All right. Thanks everybody for coming. I wonder, I know Sandy's supposed to be here. See if we can give everybody another second. Sean told me, yeah, there's Sandy. Sean told me he was going to be a little late. And Matthew also was going to be a little late. So it should be good. All right. Thanks everybody for coming. July off. It made it feel like a long time since we've met. So this meeting is being held pursuant to and in compliance with emergency ordinance number 20-A16, an emergency ordinance to ensure the continuity of government during the COVID-19 disaster. And now we will introduce ourselves. The committee members electronically present at this meeting are me, Allie Pesh, and I live near Mid Springs. Joe?
Doug Bates.
Nope.
Joe Four, live in the Highlands.
Brian Day, Emerald Ridge.
Costas Alberts, live out on 250.
Mike Kunkel, I live in Quarry Farm.
Valerie Long, I live in Old Trail.
Sandy Hausman, Parkside Village.
Mark McKenney, West Hall.
Michael Monaco near Star Hill.
David Mitchell, Fair Hill.
All right. So everybody, the persons responsible for receiving public comment are the Crozet Community Advisory Committee. The opportunities for the public to access and participate in the electronic meeting are posted on the Albemarle County calendar. And tonight we have county staff, Rachel Falkenstein, Carolyn Shaver, our clerk, and that's all I think. And then we have Anne, our representative on the Board of Supervisors. And Jenny is on vacation this week, so we do not have our planning commissioner here. So next, we have minutes. It's been a while, but Valerie sent minutes after our last meeting, and if anybody had any corrections or comments, speak now.
I wasn't present at the meeting, but they looked good to me. I'll move their passage.
Thanks, Brian.
Second.
Thanks, Doug. All right, everybody in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, thank you. So we've got tonight the a somewhat annual, although we probably missed it last year, update from the Water and Sewer Authority. Nope, hi Josh. And so we'll start with that, and then we'll get on to the master plan business. And
Okay. Hey, thanks for having us, Ally, and the CCAC. I think it has been about the 4th or 5th summer that we have made an annual update, and it's always a pleasure. I do have Jennifer Whitaker, I think, is online with us, our Director of Engineering and Maintenance, as well as Victoria Fort, our Senior Engineer, and she's in charge of the dam project. So let's see if I can share screen. Woo-wee.
Bill, while you're sharing, adjust your camera so we can see more of you than your eyeballs.
Oh, okay. What do I need to do? Is
Just that, yeah, down a little bit. That's better. We're getting, yeah.
Okay. Again, thanks for having us. Did want to give a brief update of what the Ravenna Water and Sewer Authority is doing in your neighborhood and keep you informed. So we have a nice picture of the Beaver Creek Reservoir there. And a quick review, the Ravenna Water and Sewer Authority is a child organization created by the city of Charlottesville, City Council, and the Albemarle County Board of Supervisors back in 1972. So we're almost 50 years old here. And then further, you may know that the Albemarle County created the Albemarle County Service Authority, who serves as your retail provider of water and sewer services in Crozet and throughout the county. And we wholesale and sell to the city and to the Albemarle County Service Authority. So we have actually 6 water treatment plants that we manage in the county and the city, 5 reservoirs, and 4 wastewater treatment plants. So we manage all of the water production and wastewater treatment for the entire community that is connected to public services. In Crozet, we have the Beaver Creek Reservoir. I assume you can see my pointer. Is that true? Okay. We have the intake that's in the reservoir. We have a pump station that's down below the foot of the dam. And so water goes through the intake down to the raw water pump station, and then we pump it in a pipe, this blue line, upper routes 802 and 240 over to the Crozet Water Treatment Plant, where we produce drinking water for your community. We have a water pump station here, and we also have a tank we call the Buck's Elbow tank that's in Crozet. So we manage all of these utilities and infrastructure in Crozet. So we've had about 5 projects in the recent past and future. And let's see, you're covering up. So they total almost $42 million. The first one is the finished water pump station that we finished in 2018, which is near the water treatment plant. We also added granular activated carbon filters at the Crozet Water Treatment Plant, and that is state-of-the-art technology to remove disinfection byproducts and other pollutants from your drinking water. We just finished a couple months ago an expansion of the Crozet Water Treatment Plant from 1 to 2 million gallons per day in treatment capacity. And so that was just in time for the hot weather and the high demand that we're getting from Crozet now. We have a new pump station near the reservoir that we're planning to pump raw water to the treatment plant, and also modifications to the dam to make the spillway larger so that we can pass more rain if and when we should have it to meet our regulatory requirements. And if you follow climate action and what that means, and what I get from it is the extremes are going to be greater. So the rain is going to be higher levels of rain during short periods, which could increase opportunities for flooding. And it makes it even more important that we have the spillway sized correctly so that it can manage the water that would need to pass through the spillway and through the reservoir. As well, the drought conditions may be more extreme, so I read. So we're always studying the reservoir and make sure we have enough water to provide the community for a long time. So we have 5 projects that we've been working on over about $42 million. And you pay for those through your water and sewer bills to the Albemarle County Service Authority. And we charge the Service Authority for these projects, but these being all in Crozet are 100% paid for by the Albemarle County Service Authority. So I mentioned the new GAC filters. Those are these white containers. And so we run the water through these filters, and there's like a black carbon material there that takes out pollutants out of the drinking water. And that was a couple $1 million. We built that. We housed them in the red facility. The finished water pump station is after we've treated it, and we pump it into the distribution system, and we rebuilt that facility a few years ago. And the water treatment plant that we recently upgraded from 1 to 2 million gallons per day in treatment capacity. And we also updated the wastewater facility that's across Route 240. And so now, instead of having to pump it out and truck it back to Morris Creek in Charlottesville, we actually have a pipe, and we can take the wastewater and put it in the sewer pipe and pipe it back to Morris Creek. So that was a big project that we were pleased to get completed. Even despite the COVID challenges, work went on and we got it finished. So Beaver Creek is the largest project we have on our plate, which is about $27 million to upgrade the spillway in the dam. I guess, can you guys see this? I've got your faces positioned so that I can't. But anyway, this is what we call a labyrinth spillway, a concrete spillway that could go through the dam. And then we would have a metal bridge going across the spillway on Browns Gap Turnpike. And, you know, we've had some other meetings and a lot of conversation about closing Browns Gap Turnpike. We have been working successfully with our consultant, and we are thinking we can build a temporary road actually on the water side of the dam and maintain traffic during construction. There was talk about building a detour road around the outside, the lower side of the dam, which was going to be difficult and very expensive. And so right now we're more optimistic that we can build a detour road on the inside of the dam. So we'll keep you informed about that. There was also discussion about where this new raw water pump station was going to be located, if we have to move it from below the dam. And we had looked at 4 or 5 sites, mostly on this side of the reservoir. And at one point we were focusing on site 3, which is adjacent to the Clark family's property. But we've done some more research into the property and the topography and cost. And now we are focusing on sites 1 and 2 and not so much site 3. So we hope that will work out well for us. We're probably going to present this to our board of directors this month and get their feedback on the 2 different sites. As well, we are working with a federal agency, the Natural Resources Conservation Service, and they will weigh in on which site they prefer. And since we're asking them to fund 65% of this project and hoping that they will, we will give them that prerogative to have an opinion on where the site would be of the pump station. So that's in front of us in 2024 and through 2026. So Beaver Creek, as you may know, is your sole supply of public drinking water. And we have a lot of thoughts about drought and dry weather now, and we're monitoring that closely. The water pool is currently 2 feet below normal in the reservoir, which means it's about 85% full, that we have about 430 million gallons stored in the reservoir at this point. And your community uses between about 0.5 to just over 1 million gallons per day. And so in addition, we have evaporation, and we release water to the Beaver Creek below the dam. And so by our count, we have at least 7 months of storage within the reservoir. So while we are monitoring it carefully, we're not waving a red flag that we're concerned about the water level at Beaver Creek Reservoir. We hope we continue to get these afternoon showers that we've had the last 2 days and helping to replenish the flow, and even keeping an eye on the storm that's in the Gulf right now, whether that may make its way here in the coming week or so and refill Beaver Creek. So we are monitoring that, but today you were over 1 million gallons in your demand as a community. So that's about the highest we've seen. But right now we feel we have adequate amount of water in the reservoir. We upgraded the pumps so that we can pump up to almost 2 million gallons to our treatment plant. And now we can treat almost 2 million gallons at the treatment plant. So we are pretty well equipped to serve your community at this point. On the wastewater side, we're building what we call a flow equalization tank. It's going to be a large concrete tank located off of Route 250, sort of in between 250 and 240. And we have a pump station there. And so when there's a lot of rain that we're looking forward to, and it finds its way into the sewer system, which we don't want it to get there, but it does anyway, we are going to take about 1 million gallons of wastewater and store it in this tank, and then wait for the flow in the pipes to subside as the rain dies down. And then we will put this flow out of the tank back into the wastewater piping and ship it to Morris Creek. So it helps us to avoid sanitary sewer overflows, which are not only distasteful, but illegal. And so this is a technique that we can control the flows from Crozet. And this graphic shows you that the Crozet service area, all the wastewater from Crozet comes back to Morris Creek to be treated. So we have about 5 miles of piping and 4 wastewater pump stations that convey all the wastewater from Crozet back to Morris Creek. And hopefully you know where that is. It's right off of the interstate, sort of at the foot of Monticello Mountain in Route 20. And hopefully you don't smell any odors when you drive by now, because we put a lot of effort and money into killing the odors and making that no longer a problem. I'll be glad to answer any questions as I go if you have them, because now I'm going to jump to the bigger picture of the urban area and our whole community and our community water supply projects and plan. We have 6 projects that total about $173 million in the area. We're renovating the South Ravenna treatment plant right now. It hadn't been renovated in many years. And we're getting started to renovate the observatory treatment plant, which is on Observatory Mountain at the university. We actually leased that property for the treatment plant from the university. Thirdly, we're going to build a new pipe from the Ragged Mountain Reservoir, which is to your left as you're leaving Charlottesville on the 64, going home, actually to your right. You can see it on the left and right of the interstate as you first start climbing that first hill before you get to Ivy, Ragged Mountain Reservoir. We have a very old pipe that conveys the untreated water to the observatory treatment plant. And we're going to replace that pipe and build a pump station right here to do the pumping. And when we finish that, we intend to raise the level of the Ragged Mountain Reservoir about 600 million gallons, raise it 12 feet to increase our water supply for the community. And lastly, we're going to build a pipeline from the Ravenna Reservoir over behind Walmart and all the way to this pump station, and in effect connect the Ragged Mountain Reservoir with the Ravenna Reservoir and allow us to pump. We can pump raw water both ways. We'll be able to take untreated water from the Ragged Mountain Reservoir, which is going to hold about 2 billion gallons of water, and pump it back to the South Ravenna treatment plant and treat it there if we need to. And vice versa, we can pump water from South Ravenna to Ragged. That will be the way we get water into Ragged, because Ragged has a very small watershed, and rainwater will not fill Ragged Mountain Right now, water is piped from Sugar Hollow Reservoir to fill Ragged Mountain. So this new pipe will replace the old pipe that's coming from Sugar Hollow. So those are the 6 major projects we have for our community water supply plan for the larger community. And Jennifer, did you have anything to add, or Victoria? Hearing nothing, Ally, if you have any questions, we'd be glad
Thank
to
you.
to
Thank you,
answer
Joe.
them. But that's what we're doing in your neighborhood.
That's great. It's really, really interesting. I saw Anne had her hand up, so I can start with you, Anne.
Thank you. So you mentioned a 7-month supply, if I understood you correctly, at Beaver Creek. Is that the usable supply? Because I would assume that DEQ has limits on how low the pool can go before there's serious environmental damage.
That is the usable supply. So that's
Okay.
so that's above the bottom. We recognize we can't get every drop out of it. And you know, right now we do not have a permit from DEQ for Beaver Creek Reservoir. It's a grandfathered reservoir. It's not under permit. But as a part of accommodating and dealing with the growth of Crozet and building the larger treatment plant, we have to apply for a permit to DEQ. And so in the coming months or year, we are going to be under permit with DEQ for Beaver Creek, and they are going to require a minimum release from the reservoir to supply the stream below. So you're right, Ann, that we don't have it exactly now, but it is coming, a regulatory requirement. So when we're calculating how much water we have in the reservoir, we have to accommodate for how much the people are going to need and how much the environment's going to need below the reservoir. So we feel like we have enough for 50 years, but after that, it's a pretty tight calculation of whether we can continue to use Beaver Creek at its current volume and deal with growth in the Crozet area.
And one quick follow-up question. You mentioned after the central water line is done that you're going to raise the pool at Ragged Mountain, which is spectacular. Is there process that's going to be required for that? Because it only took us about 25 years to get the first plan passed. So I'd love to know when we need to start to support that pool raise.
We project it's going to be around 2032 before we finish, right concurrently with finishing the pipe, which would provide the water. We will have to do some grading, basically minor grading around the reservoir, but the dam was built large enough that it will accommodate the additional 12 feet vertical of water without modifications. But the intake structure and some grading around the reservoir will have to be completed. And you may know, but the Ragged Mountain Agreement says when the community's demand equals 85% of the supply, that the city or the service authority can ask us to raise the water level. We are working.
Oh, good.
We're working with the city and the service authority about an agreement to amend that and say, when we finish the pipe, we can raise the water level without necessarily having to meet the 85% requirement. But that is in the works right now.
Thank you.
Okay.
Cool. Great, Brian.
Yeah, just a quick question. Wonderful presentation. You mentioned the treatment plant here in Crozet is up to 2 million gallons a day, but that the carbonated charcoal filter is 1 million gallons a day. Are we going to have to increase it as well?
Well, likely we will. Again, your maximum demand right now is around 1 million gallons. So we can GAC, as we say, all the water. We can treat it with the GAC filters now. But as your demand grows and you go above 1 million gallon per day, we would have to add more GAC contactors in order to keep up with that increased demand. So yes, that's right.
Thank you.
We would have to add GAC facilities.
David?
Yeah, hey, I'm your neighbor over here at Fair Hill, so I'm going to ask some selfish questions.
Okay.
The first one is, and Victoria gets an email from me at least once a year, usually in August, when the licking hole basin is showing that it's looks pretty full, but y'all don't consider it full yet for dredging. I think it's becoming a mosquito pit, but I'm the one that has to sit out here and get bit by mosquitoes. So I understand that I'm a little bit jaundiced in my evaluation of that. So I was just wondering, when is that thing supposed to be dredged? Because when we bought this property like 15 years ago, it was any day now or within a couple of years. I mean, do you feel the need to even dredge it at all anymore, or what?
We're going to get what we call a bathymetric survey that measures what capacity is left. How much sludge is in the basin to see how much storage is left. And I don't recall right offhand exactly when that's due, but it's in the coming year or so. And
Bill, I think we just did one a couple years ago.
We did?
Yes.
Okay. All right. And what did that tell us? What percent was available? Did you remember?
I don't know right off the top of my head, but I know that we determined that we didn't need to dredge immediately. And I believe it's programmed into our CIP, but not in the 5-year program. I think it's in the out years. But it's still something we plan to pursue when we reach the point where we don't have sufficient storage and we're not trapping sediment.
Is it fair to say that, okay, so that's the key. When you think you are no longer trapping sediment, that's the key, which it's not really about the volume, it's about the trapping sediment and the function.
About it being able to fulfill its function of trapping sediment that goes into the South Fork Basin.
So my second question is, y'all are putting money away in your capital improvement fund to fund this?
Yes. I won't say we have that in our CIP, and we programmed to fund it. And that's one we're going to have to work out who totally is going to pay for it, such as the city, or is it all going to be Service Authority? Probably. It is unique to our system because it's a stormwater basin. It's not drinking water or wastewater. And not that we give it any less consideration, but we'll have to work that out. But ultimately, if it comes through us, then the water and sewer ratepayers would have to fund it. So the Albemarle Service Authority likely funding all of it, I would think.
I'm sure Western Ridge and the neighborhoods and that live around it would love to have it be a little more functional. I mean, it's great fishing, don't get me wrong. Even I can catch fish in that thing. And which is hard. And I see people out there in canoes all the time, which is great. So my other, just more of a comment, y'all are doing a good job of keeping things as clean as a construction site can at the entrance to our subdivision. Thank you. And your project managers for that subcontract, your contractor kept me informed, and I appreciate that. I know there's obviously no way that you can haul that much concrete and dirt out of that site and into that site without damaging the road a little bit, but I'm confident you will repair the damage when the time comes.
Yes, sir. Well, thank you. And give us a call if you find anything that.
I have a direct line with the superintendent. He's a great guy, taking care of every problem I've ever had.
Oh, well, that's good. That's great. Okay.
I'm done being selfish. Anybody else got a real question?
Thanks,
I guess
Dave.
I'll just have a comment, and that is that the city needs to understand that the Licking Hole Basin is protecting South Fork.
Yeah.
And if they want to have water to drink, they better ante up.
Yeah. I'm not sure, Ann, if we have an existing agreement that says who's going to pay for that. We're going to have to look in our files and figure that out.
That'll take 10 years too. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, all of our, as I've said, all of our costs are funded either by the city and or the Albemarle Service Authority. And we have numerous agreements through the last 50 years about who's going to pay for what and how much. And so we frequently have to refer back to these agreements to make sure we're following what was agreed upon decades ago.
So just don't forget this, when we bought the property, we were approached by the Ravenna Water Service Authority to provide a better access easement for this future dredging, because you weren't around for this, but the only access they had to dredge that basin was through Western Ridge. And that would be a disaster. So, we've got this pretty rural area on this side, and we have better topography too. I mean, it's much flatter than the backside of Western Ridge. And y'all have an easement to build a nice access road to get all the equipment in and get all the sludge out. I'm happy to have that happen sooner rather than later.
Okay. We'll have to recruit you to try to help us find somewhere to take that sludge.
Well,
that is the
seriously, I offered for you to put it on the fields, but I was told that the problem was that they were concerned about what the contaminants might be.
It could be the case.
I even offered to have a dewatering area where you could at least dry it out so you weren't hauling a lot of water off site, which would have, that's a lot of weight and a mess.
Right.
I'm happy to help if it'll help you get done quicker.
Okay. All right. Well, all good questions.
Thanks, David. Yeah, I do think it's interesting to hear about licking holes, so not too selfish. Anybody else? Questions for Bill or his team? I can't see everybody, but I don't.
Thank you for having us. We look forward to seeing you again next year.
Yeah,
Allie, there's a hand up in attendees.
Oh, thank you. All right, Carolyn, if you want to let Matt.
Hey, thanks for taking my call. I just had a couple of questions. What's the cost of pumping water from one reservoir to another? And then you mentioned we have 7 months of water. In general, not including the fact that there's been a serious lack of rainfall, but in general, what's a suggested normal amount of water for any community to have? And then is RWSA planning to install any rooftop solar on any of their facilities in Crozet or anywhere else? You mentioned the climate challenges, so I want to see what you're doing to help with that. And then what can you all do to help improve the quality of the creeks that go into the reservoirs? We have a property that you all stole our land to run the sewer line from the school to the treatment plant through, and you put a manhole cover right in the field that I grew up playing in, so I couldn't really play in that anymore. But we've got a creek down behind our property that the numerous neighbors have septic fields right along it, and just curious what y'all are doing to get people off of those septic systems and into the sewer system to improve the quality of the creeks that are flowing into our reservoir.
Hey, Matt, you had a lot of questions. If you can help me back at the beginning, you started off asking about the cost to pump water from one reservoir to another.
Yes, sir. Yeah, it seems like it's probably pretty expensive to pump water to fill up that reservoir. I'm just curious about those costs.
I don't know that I know the estimated operating costs, but you're right. It would be expensive, but we have no choice other than using the 100-year-old pipe that conveys a little trickle of water from Sugar Hollow. So by putting in a larger new pipe from South Ravenna Reservoir, we'll be able to fill Ragged Mountain and fill it more quickly. The pumping costs, I couldn't estimate how much that would be, but I'm sure it's thousands of dollars a year. Although we're not pumping constantly, we would only pump when we needed to put water in the reservoir. So we'd have to get back to you on an estimate like that. We do estimate it's going to be about $80 million to build the pipeline. Now, what was your next question?
Are you all planning on doing any rooftop solar at any of your facilities in Crozet or anywhere in the county? you mentioned the climate challenges and just.
We don't have any plans to at this moment. We do have a sustainability group in our organization that's looking at opportunities like that. But we do take all of the methane gas that comes from our wastewater treatment process, and we have the facilities to generate heat so that we use in our treatment process. So we are recycling methane gas from wastewater as a green initiative that we have. To a different, we also have the Ravenna Solid Waste Authority, and we operate the Ivy landfill, and we have leased property there for solar cells to be installed by another company. I think the Planning Commission recently recommended approval of that project, and it's going to be heard by the Board of Supervisors to allow solar arrays at the Ivy landfill on the closed cells there. So we're a party to that much of a solar initiative.
That's good to hear. You mentioned that we had 7 months of water. What is normal for us or for any community to have as a water supply?
Yeah, I don't know that there's a norm. It's a function of how much the demand is and how much you're willing to invest in a supply. For example, the South Ravenna Reservoir has about a 60 to 90 day water supply in it when it's full. So if it stopped filling, we would have 60 to 90 days at the South Ravenna Reservoir. Whereas at Ragged Mountain, even though it's over 2 feet down, we have over 9 months of supply there. Down at Todia Creek in Scottsville, we have multiple years supply. So because Scottsville only uses about 50,000 gallons a day. So Crozet, when you're in the winter, your demand is down to 500,000 a day. In the hot summer, you're up to 1 million. So we manage the facilities to try to make sure it's adequate and follow our regulations. I wouldn't say that there's a norm, though. If you read the news about the states to the west and Hoover Dam and Lake Mead and that part of the country, their water supply is getting very low. I don't know how many months they have, but we deal with that to a degree with water conservation measures, that if we feel like our water supply is getting too low, we will ask the county and the city to implement voluntary and then mandatory water restrictions to try to lower that demand and extend our water supply. We haven't had to do that for 4 years, and we hope not to do that anytime soon, but that is another tool in our box to extend our water supply.
And then thank you for that. Last question is, what are y'all doing to improve access to the sewer system for low income residents or residents that have been here probably longer than everybody else on the call? Their homes are 50, 100 years old, and they've got septic fields right along the creek that flows into the reservoir. I had a neighbor who told me they reached out, and I can't remember if it was you all, the county, and they said they had to pay $7,000 up front, and there wasn't a payment plan option. Well, that pretty much shut them out, meaning they're going to continue to produce a ton of nitrogen and other, polluting elements going into our reservoir, which then increase your costs of operation and increase my cost for my water bill. So what are y'all doing to improve access for those folks?
The Albemarle County Service Authority would be the organization that would work with those residents, and it's my understanding, and Ann maybe can speak better to it than I, but everyone in the country recently got a tranche, as they call it, of American Rescue funds from the federal government. Virginia received $4.3 billion, and the county and the city each received American Rescue Plan dollars. One of the 4 purposes was to improve water, wastewater, and broadband systems. I have heard that the county is talking with the Albemarle Service Authority about doing some of what you just mentioned, and that is trying to make it more feasible to connect septic system residences into the public wastewater system. So that would really be through the Albemarle Service Authority. But again, Ann and the Service Authority could probably address that better than I, but I understand that is in discussion. I can't tell you exactly where, but it's in discussion.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bill, I just wanted to elaborate on his question about how much water supply storage we have in the reservoir. So when we are currently working on our VWB permit for the Crozet area, because as Bill mentioned, we don't have a permit. But in putting together what our release plan would be downstream, we had to model what the reservoir looks like during the drought of record, which was the drought, I believe, from 2001 to 2002. And we found through modeling that even 50 years out, with the demands that we're projecting in 50 years, the reservoir should have enough water to get through the drought of record. So if we had similar rainfall conditions to what we had in 2001, 2002, even 50 years from now, when demands are much higher, we should have sufficient water.
Thanks, Victoria. Great questions, Matt, and great answers, Bill. Sandy?
Yeah, I was just curious as to, Victoria, how you estimate growth. In other words, how much bigger do we think Albemarle County can get before water becomes an issue for us? Is it, an unlimited supply? And I've also been told by someone that our water table is pretty shallow. So I don't know what that means for our future, especially given climate change.
Bill, I don't know if you wanted to jump in on that or you want me to take this.
Go ahead and talk about the county collaboration that we do.
Sure. So we did a study a few years back that was completed in 2019. That was called the Drinking Water Infrastructure Plan. And what we basically did was we projected out demands for 50 years in the Crozet community. And then we looked at what our facilities are able to handle. And we worked pretty closely with the county and looked at growth areas, projected growth. And then we estimate how the long-term growth is expected to be spread out over the next several decades. And that's how we projected what the water use would be. We also look at current per capita water usage for residential and for commercial development, so that we can project out not only how many people we believe would be living in the area and using water, but how much water based on conservation measures and the type of usage we would expect the community to need.
And so we're following with the planning, with the county's planning department guidance, the county's comprehensive plan, and what densities they project and plan in their comprehensive plan. And that's generally the basis. Then we estimate how much water the community will need. One interesting fact is that it used to be per person, the usage in our community was 110 gallons per person per day. But through the improvements to plumbing technology and water efficient shower heads and toilets and those type devices in the plumbing code, the usage is now down to about 60 gallons per person per day. So while we have grown in population, the community's water demand actually has not increased as fast as it was predicted decades ago. So that's good news. So we don't know where technology may take us for the future. So we can build larger reservoirs, but it takes land to do that. And so that's not our first option. You mentioned the water table, and that does contribute, I guess, to surface water. But we're taking all of our water from surface water out of the rivers and containing it in the reservoir, and then we take it out of the reservoirs. So we're not like typical rural residences that have a well 300 or 400 feet deep, and that's where the water table can be very important to them.
Are there any conservation measures that your agency is considering or that the county has asked you about that could be implemented in the near future?
Conservation measures. We're always trying to be very conservative. We try not to waste water, and we reuse it within our processes as much as we can. You know, the university is by far the largest water user in our community with over 1 million gallons a day that they use. But they have a very aggressive plan to reduce their water consumption up to the year 2035. They tell us that even though they're adding 200,000 square feet of buildings per year and students and staff, that their water demand is and will continue to decline until about the year 2035. And then they think really their optimization measures will bottom out and their total demand will start to increase. So we work through the city with the university and other organizations like that.
So Bill, I got a quick question. We're in Crozet, we're using between 500,000 and 1.1 million. I understand it depends on the season. So, I mean, is 750,000 gallons a day on average a reasonable number? And then you divide that by, did you say 60 or 65 per person?
Yes, sir, per day.
So, I mean, that's like 11,000 people, 11,500, all depends how you play with it. If anybody has Victoria, a better number on what the average is? Because I know you said 500,000 to 1.1, but I understand 1.1 is everybody trying to keep the grass green. So
Yeah.
that doesn't really count. So what is, I'm just trying to.
Well, we have one of the lowest.
The population is really what I'm getting.
We have one of the lower per capita usage demands in the country. So our community is very thrifty and frugal. And potentially a large part of that is we don't have a lot of industries, if any, in our community that use a lot of water.
A lot of it has to do with the price of water too, by the way.
And it can. And I'm sure the Service Authority would say that their price is very affordable.
Well, relative to some places, sure.
Yeah.
I was just curious. I wanted to back into that number because there's always this argument about population in Crozet.
Yeah.
I think average day is closer to 0.6 or 0.65, around in that range.
Average.
Average day.
And then divide that by 6 or 60 or 65. So we're talking 10,000 people-ish. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean.
I have my calculator in front of me, Victoria. I won't make you do that.
I mean, there's plenty of people that are still
sure
not customers.
Well, yeah, but the growth area generally is the service area, not exactly.
Yeah.
I understand. Right. Okay. All right. That's all. I'm done.
But yeah, I mean, it's definitely, as far as estimating our population, it's another tool, and we've been estimating about 10 or 11.
I mean, it's definitely going down. I mean,
so we'll see.
Price and people start to figure that out, and then just the requirements of plumbing fixtures nowadays.
Yeah. As older houses leave the inventory of houses and they're replaced by new houses, your per capita demand will go down. So that's what we're seeing, and it's been going on for quite a while, really. So
Rachel's probably the expert here too, but with new denser development, you don't have lawns for every family.
Yeah, I mean, does anybody have at some point you diminishing returns? It's going to flatten out.
That's right.
You're not going to get to zero. What is
right?
20 years out, we're like at 50 maybe. I mean, I don't know. Y'all, this is your world. What is it?
Of when we're going to
guess. If you knew the answer, you'd be in Vegas and not in Charlottesville.
Yeah. We're projecting an increasing demand for the entire community each year, each decade,
sure.
And making sure we have enough water to accommodate that. And I will put in a plug, and that's why it's very critical that we need to get this pipeline from the Ravenna Reservoir over to the Ragged Mountain Reservoir, so that we can treat the water that we need for the population and the demand that we have. Right now, we can only get 3 to 4 million gallons out of the observatory treatment plant, and that's what's hooked to the Ragged Mountain Reservoir. So we have our largest reservoir with our second largest water treatment plant. So if the South Ravenna water treatment plant was out of operation for some reason, and it is located not far from the end of the runway of the Charlottesville Airport, the reservoir and the treatment plant. If that was impacted, we could not serve our community with the observatory treatment plant today, because we can only get about 4 million gallons and the community uses about 11 million gallons today in the summer. But we are expanding the water treatment plant with its renovation up to 10 million gallons. And then putting the new pipe, as I showed you, from Ragged Mountain over to the observatory treatment plant. And when we get that finished, and then we get the pipe from Ravenna over to Ragged, so we can keep Ragged full of water because it won't fill by itself, then we will have a huge amount of resilience and redundancy within our system, that we can move water around and treat it and accommodate lots of different scenarios that might come up with our 2 largest water treatment plants and 2 largest reservoirs. So we are actively working on that project. We've already put the pipe in adjacent to Birdwood Golf Course. We've got a project that's going to start next year. We're going to bore under Route 250 right there at the Whedon Center and extend that pipe under the railroad tracks over to the UVA Foundation property. I think it's called Westover Farm.
Yeah.
So we're slowly getting this pipe in place with an intent by no later than 2033, the entire length would be in place all the way between the Ragged Mountain Reservoir and the Ravenna Reservoir, and we could ship water back and forth as needed. So we look
I've
forward
never
to
understood,
that day.
I've never understood the pushback to this plan. I mean, you take the extra water in heavy rainfall events and you shuttle it over to Ragged Mountain.
Yeah.
And you don't impact the flow of what goes over the dam into the North Fork of the Ramsey River. I mean, it's
Right. And
I've never understood why it took so long to get that done.
Yeah, the watershed for the South Ravenna Reservoir extends almost everything west of Route 29 from Israel's Mountain in Batesville almost to Greene County to the north. So when it rains anywhere in that reservoir, if it's not absorbed or transpirated by vegetation, it makes its way to the Ravenna Reservoir. So that's why it's our critical reservoir, but it's not large enough for us to hook into it and supply the entire community for more than 2 to 3 months without getting it replenished with more rain. So it's not our answer by itself. If we would get into an extended drought, and the drought of 2002, as I understand, was about 18 months. And again, back to climate action and climate change, that as I read it, it's saying these droughts are going to be longer and more severe. And that's why we have to be able to have a plan and have the facilities that we can provide the water to the community during these extreme events. We don't want to be like Texas with their electric lines frozen and not having electricity, et cetera. And it could happen, but if we plan and prepare and fund it, and $80 million is not a small amount of money, but in today's world, it's not unreasonable either. So that's just me talking, and we're getting all these ARPA dollars around in our country, and more to come with the $1 trillion infrastructure bill that the Senate approved like yesterday, and potentially more dollars behind it. So I can tell you that Ravenna is doing its best to get with the legislators in the states and our federal representatives and try to get those dollars directed to us as much as we can, so that you, the ratepayers, don't have to pay any more than you have to for these projects. But so if you know any congressmen, give them a prod that Ravenna needs money too.
Thanks, Bill. All right, Anne, you can have the last question here.
Just a comment and a thank you. I so appreciate your strident support for the pipeline, because it has taken 15 years to sort of overcome this resistance that's saying it wasn't needed or something. The only thing I would ask you more to do, and it's probably more the service authority's job, but I think conservation measures, I hope, would come in much sooner than they have in the past. And if 1 million gallons a day is what Crozet is drawing today, we need to be conserving now. Just because there's water in the reservoir doesn't mean we should be throwing it around. And I really want to see a much more treasured approach to water in our area, everybody, not just the Crozetians, but all across the county. And when we have one neighborhood that uses most of the water for irrigation, that just makes me hopping mad. So in some other part of the county, we have to figure out a way to win that moral obligation battle coming up.
And if we don't have a major storm or major rain, we're going to bring it to our board on August 24th and talk about water conservation measures.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Victoria.
Thank you.
It's nice to see you guys again.
Okay. We'll see you next year.
Yeah. Bye. All right. Hello, Sean. Thanks for joining.
Yeah, thanks. I'm sorry, I'm a sweaty pig and I don't want to shower because of the water shortage. So excuse me.
All right. Well, basically, what we have left tonight is just sort of regroup. My plan was mostly just to hear from Anne about how you thought the work session went. I think maybe Rachel, you had some words about, next steps or something, but if you want, we can just start with Anne and the work session last week and what the CCAC can do at the Planning Commission next month and in preparation for the final approval steps here.
All right, well, I will just sort of update you on what's been happening over the last week, because I have received lots of communication from people from all over the county wondering how, sort of what they can do or what's going on. And several people who were not on the committee actually sent questions that I would just like to read at the beginning. And then there are lots of things that I received from people on the committee, and I hope that you all will. I'm going to turn my video off because my unstable sign has come up. The people on the committee who shared ideas with me, I really hope that you will talk about them, but also that I have a list, so if things are forgotten, I'll come back at the end and mention some other things. So a really good question that I received was about, has the County Board of Supervisors discussed, held a hearing and voted to adopt the middle density housing across the county as a zoning category? And my answer to that so far is no. And that made me realize that that is a really important process that needs to happen so that it is the larger perspective about, if this is such a great idea, then perhaps it should be something which is available in other neighborhoods as well. And then the other comment that I think is really telling is that we're looking at our master plan and which is part of our comp plan. But are we really writing an affordable housing plan instead of a comp plan master plan? And should they be separated? So the board should adopt an affordable housing policy that's countywide first, or along with this, which preserves existing and proffered affordability. And we all face this, the first lucky buyer of an affordable house under our plan, which has been in place for 20 years, benefits tremendously. And if they have to move, they get the equity, and that's great. But that's not providing any long-term solution to us. And so I know members of this committee have great suggestions about better ways to do that than just looking at density numbers. So I'm going to just stop there and hopes that people will say things and I will take notes and we'll talk about things more. But I think the more we share different ideas, the better prepared all of us will be to go to the Planning Commission and really advocate for our community plan. Thanks.
Thanks. So speak up, guys. Does anybody have, I mean, it sounds like Doug? Did you have?
Thank you, Ally. Anne, as usual, has covered some of the most important territory that I wanted to cover. I'll make my remarks brief. I think the draft that is in front of the board right now is in fact an affordable housing plan without sufficient action and thought before it is adopted. It is a county-wide thought, and it extends far beyond just affordability of housing. It's income inequality, health issues, education availability. It's all of those things wrapped together, and it's a much bigger problem than can be squeezed into a master plan. And just for that basis alone, I would recommend, not that anyone cares, but that we retain the 2010 master plan. That is in fact a better approach for the current Crozet. There is one other point I would like to make. I was embarrassed for Anne, for the Childs family, and for Crozet in general by the treatment they received by the majority of the Board of Supervisors. I know we cannot vote for supervisors and other magistrates, but we can inform their voters, and we can lend our support to their opponents financially and with effort. And if we have a thought here that we're not being heard, maybe this will get somebody's attention. Thank you.
Thanks, Doug. Joe, I saw your hand next.
Yeah, thanks, Ally, and thank you, Doug. I had sort of two broad thoughts coming out of the Board of Supervisors meeting. The first that goes to Doug's point about the Tabor properties. I certainly share Anne's concerns. That I actually thought idea as a matter of substance to do this. But I certainly agree that doing it at the 11th hour, adding it in this late in the game without a lot of community input is not the right idea. And so I just want to speak up because I know at that meeting there were supervisors who said, well, some of the CAC said that they thought it was a good idea. Sure, maybe in 5 years or 10 years. And so I like Anne's suggestion, which she threw out, which is there should be a notation in the report that says this was discussed and this is a possibility at the next go round when we get sufficient input. So I think that is an excellent suggestion. The other one is the idea that the Board of Supervisors talked about, this expansion of middle density. They said we want it all over. We want it in more places. First, I think that represents, as we all probably know, a fundamental misunderstanding of where exactly middle density can go. Right? I mean, there's not much buildable land left, so the idea that you can just sprinkle middle density around doesn't work. The only, as we know, the only feasible places really that are left, Old Dominion, which is already underway, Whitegate Farm, which is already underway, or plans are already in the works. The only other available part is the downtown neighborhoods area. And in my mind, the concerns that we have about middle density residential in some of these areas are precisely the reasons that staff worked so hard to come up with that neighborhood downtown density overlay idea. And so I think the idea that the Board of Supervisors has of, well, let's just sprinkle middle density everywhere, it's bringing an axe to a problem that needs a scalpel, right? And the neighborhood overlay was the scalpel that could be used to have smaller scale piecemeal redevelopment that added density on smaller scales and in keeping with the character of those historic and downtown neighborhoods without destroying affordability in those areas and the fabric of those communities. And so I hope as we go forward that Anne will really push and remind the board that this neighborhood overlay is in there. It's an idea. And I don't know if we can adopt the plan, the suggestion that we had at Western Park, where there's a phase 1A and there's a phase 1 ASAP. Maybe this needs to be a catalyst ASAP project because we already had it. We had the neighborhood overlay, but understandably, there were a few tweaks that we ran into and said, oh, we just can't quite get over the hump on this thing. And I feel like that's what the board is looking for. They want more middle density what we actually need, the neighborhood overlay is really the answer that kind of melds those two. Density in ways that fit the community in places where it can actually go.
Thanks, Joe. Does anybody have any response or other thoughts? Go ahead, David.
Let me get myself unmuted here. And I know y'all want to see my smiling face.
We do.
Yeah. So I have discussed this with several people in our industry, and Anne alluded to it in her brief comments. The problem with proffered affordability, I mean, I could go on and on about you know, supply and demand, and we've only got 5% of this county that can be developed and rezoned and blah, blah, blah. This is a place everybody wants to live, so that naturally drives up the cost of living. That aside, if you really want to make affordability a long-term option, the people that are doing that right are the land trust people, like the Jefferson Land Trust and Habitat for Humanity, because what they do is they take the cost of the land out of the equation. And then long-term, if, you know, right, let's say I develop a piece of property and I say this lot is going to be affordable, and a builder comes in and builds it and sells it at whatever that affordable number calculates out to. Well, that only lasts for the first sale. After that, it goes up to the next sale. I mean, you know, you have a house that's significantly lower than the price next to the house next to it, and yes, the finishes inside are a little different, and it's not maybe got all the landscaping, and you know, the skin is hardy plank instead of stone or brick. I mean, you know, but it still has square footage and it's in this space, and over time it will equalize to the neighbors around it, which we've all seen. Even if you've lived in a house for 50 years, if your neighbors fix it up next to you, your value goes up in some way, whether you did anything to your property or not. So I'm not completely throwing out my support for the program that's been put forward that the supervisors looked at, because I think there's value in density and middle density, or whatever you want to call it. But I also think that a long-term permanent solution is for the city, I mean, for the county and for the community in general, to basically fund these organizations that produce actual long-term affordable units that take the land value out, that do not, are not, I mean, they're influenced in some way, but not nearly to the extent other lots and parcels and developments are, by the market, because they take the land value out. I mean, you should look at what Habitat does, and you should look at what the Jefferson Land Trust does, and how they hold that cost down for the long term. And, you know, the community should frankly fund that. If that's a value that you have as a taxpayer and a landowner, you should, and a citizen of this community, you should fund it. You should say, my representatives should take my tax dollars that I pay every year, and they should fund these projects if you really want to see things change. And then, you know, frankly, you won't have these fights that y'all are having right now about what's happening to the property next to me and what's happening in my neighborhood. That's it.
Thanks, Brian. I'm David. Brian?
I want to agree with David on a portion of that, but suggest a different strategy for implementing it. And that is, there are organizations and there are policies like the low-income tax credits that are responsible for building most of the low-income units in America. And I think the county needs to create a policy that keeps the long-term value of affordable housing from particularly for rentals, but also for purchase. And David's right in that the land trusts do a real nice job in doing some of that work. And the federal policy for low-income housing tax credits makes the rental properties stay affordable for decades. And David's right in that if you create a low income or 4 low income lots, and then suddenly after the person sells it, they become, they basically gain all of the value and the house is no longer affordable. And so it takes a really innovative policy at the county level to get developers to create it in a way that the land value is kept at the affordable level for a long term. And I think it needs a policy change, and that instead of having Habitat have to build them all or whomever, that that builders need to do it, and they need to do it as a part of getting the approval to build the units. And that means that maybe the other units cost more in order to fund the long-term affordability of those units. I'm working on a project in Charlottesville, and there's an enormous political movement in Charlottesville for affordable housing. And, we're looking at building 50 units. And I mean, I was at the zoning hearing last night and so forth. And we need to continue to find not just ways to segregate low-income units, but to have them blended into neighborhoods so that there isn't a stigma for folks who don't have that money. Thanks.
So I would just argue that, argue is the wrong word. I would point out, I think a policy is actually a tax expenditure policy. I mean, whether it's, you're asking, the zoning text is already cumbersome enough, and the land use policies of this county are already cumbersome enough. I think that it is a better and more efficient use of your tax dollars, because make no mistake, when you do a rezoning and you ask for proffers, that is a tax, because the county's not paying it and the developers aren't paying it. It's being passed on to the people that purchase the properties within those developments. And that's tax, whether it's paid immediately when you buy it or over time through a mortgage. It's an expense that is passed from the buyer through the developer to the county. You can call it a lot of things, but at the end of the day, that's a tax. And I would rather see the county have some type of program that takes those dollars, those monies, whether for general tax revenues or proffers, and fund something that actually gets the job done. Because I don't believe that we're actually getting the job done.
All right, Valerie?
Thanks. I think the plan, I think the plan's in good shape. I will provide my comments about what I think the board was saying the other day in the meeting, or some of the members and some of the perception. I think part of the challenge was this plan doesn't really change all that much from the existing master plan. Obviously, the middle density is a new category, and there are a handful of places it's been added to the plan, but only a small handful. Staff, I think, did a really good job coming to us with thoughtful suggestions about where changes could be made. And in the vast majority of those, the committee expressed opposition to those changes that would have increased the designated density in those areas. And so I think, then staff followed most of that guidance, maybe all of it, more than some wanted, less than others wanted. But I think they did their best job to try and, their task was we have to accommodate some growth. It's just, we have to do it. That's the point of the master plan, is to update it to reflect 10 years have gone by and change is happening and our community is growing. So let's find a place to put it. And I think the perception may have been that, well, our staff provided a bunch of suggestions and you guys vetoed all of them. So we sent them back to the drawing board to look harder and come up with some other options. And they did that again. And then you guys still don't like that. And you know what? We want you to go back again. And everybody's got to do their part. And so I guess I would challenge our group, if we're not happy with the plan and where the middle density is suggested, or where, maybe we need to come together and make suggestions about where is a good location. If I understood Joe's comments correctly, he would, I think, but Joe, correct me if I'm wrong, I think you were saying in essence that you liked the original proposal that staff had brought forward for a kind of a downtown overlay district, identifying areas that could accommodate sort of the missing middle housing, and that was maybe a way to go. Maybe that's an idea we need to bring back up, or come up with other locations. Okay, if we don't like it in the Tabor Street block, where is a good location? I thought that was a great location for all the reasons staff did. I appreciate very much the landowners really don't want that. So my thinking is it doesn't do us a whole lot of good to leave it there, or if the landowners are saying they're never going to implement that kind of redevelopment. On the other hand, maybe it doesn't hurt either, but maybe we have to find another place, or 2, 3, or 4 in the community where it is appropriate for some additional density or some changes.
I know Michael has his hand up first. I guess then Joe, you can respond if you wanted to.
Joe, if you want to jump in real quick there, that's fine. I'll go right after you.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I just to Valerie's point. Yeah, I think yes. My thinking on the middle density is, I think we're all concerned that, I mean, like I said, there's not many places where you can put middle density where it could actually be developed, right? I mean, you can't put it in Bargman Park and say, well, that's going to be, it's not going there, right? I mean, the only place feasibly that's not in the pipeline or not already developed that it could actually do what it's intended to do and spur further density is essentially what was the downtown overlay district, right? I mean, that's the only place where redevelopment can happen. And I think the concern from a lot of people is some of those areas are ripe to be bought up, bulldozed, and have larger scale projects, right, that are middle density size. And I know that there are some limitations on square footage and building footprints and all that, but the concern is that you have bigger projects that are bought up in those neighborhoods that could happen quickly, redevelopment. And so just splashing a lot of orange on that map could lead to some problematic things in those neighborhoods. And so then the question becomes, well, how do you get more density? And that's Valerie's point, exactly. And I think that's what the neighborhood overlay district was intended to do. So maybe if we need to rework it or revise it, and I think that's exactly right. The neighborhood density was to mitigate that exact concern, right? To encourage some form of density, some form of redevelopment, but with a more targeted, again, the scalpel approach that was targeted to a specific area, taking into account the specific needs and constraints of that particular neighborhood, which again is the only area where this redevelopment is going to happen realistically. So all I'm suggesting is that the Board of Supervisors, I agree that middle density sounds appealing to them to say, let's splash orange on it, but where it's actually going to do any good, we need a more targeted approach. And so, yeah, I agree with Valerie. I mean, I think we do need to sort of meet them halfway. We need to come back with something. And that's why I think coming back and saying this neighborhood overlay thing that we talked about, that staff, Rachel and And you guys put a lot of time and thoughtfulness into working on that neighborhood overlay. And we were like close, right? We got a lot, and we just identified a couple of areas that say, I need some tweaks. Maybe that needs to be finalized before the plan goes forward. Maybe the solution is to finalize that neighborhood overlay and to include that in the plan rather than just flashing, a bunch of orange on that area.
Yeah, or if I could jump back in, or shared as an option or an alternative or something. Okay, here's another way we could do it. If I recall, there was a fair amount of detail in that overlay district plan in terms of, it was pretty strict and attempted, I thought, pretty well to avoid those problems that you mentioned, Joe. And there's no perfect way to have it both ways. If you want to have it, some areas it might not work as perfectly as others, but I think there was a lot of good ideas about the language that was pretty restrictive to try and say you can have more small missing middle units, but you can't, you got to do it within an old house, carve an old house up into 4 units or whatever, those types. So anyway, I'll stop and let others talk.
And I think, and just one last thing, Michael, I'm sorry, I'll let you go just a second. But to Valerie's point, I think this is a perfect example of what Valerie was talking about this perception that we are anti-growth and we're digging in our heels. The neighborhood overlay made it a long way, right? And I feel like the report almost misrepresents, right? Because it includes it, but as a future project, as a catalyst project, right? So it's like, well, someday we ought to think about this neighborhood downtown overlay. It's like, well, we were like almost to the goal line. We were on the 2-yard line, right? And like, it just didn't quite get there. So yeah, I think the plan almost sort of misrepresents how close we got to sort of compromise and come through there. And this may be an example where it actually makes it look like the CAC or the community is a little more sort of obstructionist or a little more, anti-growth than really we were, because that plan.
Yeah. Sorry, Joe, you're breaking up a little bit, but I just wanted to respond quickly to just 2 things that Valerie said. I bristled at your word veto, because as we know, this committee does not have any of that kind of power. So I don't want anybody watching this or writing an article about this to say that the CCAC vetoed any of staff's ideas. And I actually recall—
Fair point. It was a poor choice of words. Forgive me. I expressed our strong opposition.
Yeah, and I actually recall a lot of support for a lot of their ideas about, like the downtown overlay. We were really just arguing about how, if the rules were worded the way we wanted, as far as the details of that. And the other thing is that I just think personally that we just don't agree about how much growth Crozet is obligated to absorb or provide for the county. So yes, 10 years have passed, but that doesn't mean, we already have growth built into our plan. We're arguing about how much growth. So I don't think it's like a given that Crozet is supposed to find as much density as another magistrate supervisor who might want us to find here. So that's not a given. I mean, we have physical constraints, water restraints, school restraints, infrastructure restraints. So that's just, I don't think it's our obligation to the world at large for Crozet to fit a million more houses. Anyway, I'll let Michael go.
Yeah, wow, I made a mistake letting you go, Joe. I can't believe. Yeah, no, I had like 1 or 2 things to say. I mean, obviously I'm, very new to CCAC, so I've been trying to just like sit back and listen as much as possible, learn from what's been done. I will say to what David was saying about buying affordable houses, I can speak to some of that because we purchased a designated affordable house in Crozet in 2019 and live there now. So if anyone has questions about the process of how that goes, feel free to shoot me an email. And I think it does have the current policy, the countywide, does have its pros and cons. I think it does, without any like outside organization assisting, I think it does create the Crozet that we see today, and doesn't necessarily make a huge drop in the bucket when it comes to like long-term community affordability. And you know, the other thing about the conversation about density and affordable housing, you know, one of the county's stated goals is to reduce carbon emissions to net zero by 2050, I think. And one great way to do that is to build dense, walkable communities where people can access all the things they need without needing to drive or with needing minimal driving. So something like middle density, especially anything that can lead to like mixed use zoning in the future, I'm all for it. I would love to see that because I mean I plan to be here for a while and plan to do whatever possible to keep, you know, the couple degrees centigrade globally from rising. And there is a certain extent to which it kind of feels like the arguments about you know, future land use designations for particular parcels of land do kind of feel like holding a committee to discuss the possibility of rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic. Like there's some really big problems, and I don't know, it seems I think the community that we want to build, and from what I'm hearing, like I don't hope I'm not misrepresenting anyone, but a you know, small, dense, sustainable community, it's going to require some changes to things like future land use designations, and that's just how it is. That's not like eminent domain. That's not rolling up to someone's front door with a bulldozer. So yeah, that's all I have to say.
Thanks, Michael. It's nice to hear from everybody. And on that note, we haven't heard from everybody. So if anybody else had thoughts for Anne, or we can, you know, let you, Anne, respond. I guess I wanted to say that I felt a little misrepresented as far as the committee members' support of the Tabor property, because we were shown it just at the very last meeting, and it was sort of presented, in my opinion, like this is what we're bringing to the board. Okay. So I just wanted to say that I personally I support Anne's request for that to be taken out of the middle density designation in this plan. If that wasn't clear last time. But anybody else have comments? Or do you want to go ahead, Anne?
Sorry, forgot again. Rachel may have an answer for this, but throughout a lot of comments, people are talking about the downtown area, and yet we've never mentioned the 150, however many units will be put on the JB Barnes on the lumberyard, which is as walkable as it gets in downtown. So while we do have the 300 units already in the pipeline in just those 3 projects that were already mentioned, there are still more that are coming. And I may forget later, so I would like to just ask people to be thinking about your own neighborhood and how many units are in it, so that we can sort of build a bigger sort of story map or something about where people live. I loved at the beginning of the meeting, people introducing themselves and where they live and what a geographic spread we have all across from Batesville to Whitehall and everything in between. And so I think there's a lot of information in this group that we can share among each other and try to make sure we have the good story to tell. And David made such a good point about the land trust. I will take that forward right away. I know there's been a lot of support for that amongst many advocates for a good year or so, and I have been waiting to learn more and been trying to learn more about the management of these things, because I am very reluctant to just turn money over to a bunch of people and say, here, go spend this. I want to see the same diligence that the county uses with its budget, you know, every penny, every line item accounted for. And I think that probably is well possible with these organizations, but the fact that they could be permanently affordable, or permanent meaning 40 years, I think is the agreement we have, then that is a really good start. There are at least 2 properties which have had, I guess, the older version of what is now LIHTC federal funding and HUD funding that have reached their 30 years, and the county actually invested, I think, just under $500,000 toward renovations to get them to remain. This is almost 400 units in the Rio district, to remain in the affordable category for another 40 years after they were renovated. So that kind of investment is something we're doing now. It is a policy decision in that we decide to do it and spend money on it, as David had described. The other category that has been new over the last 3 years is to work on various tax arrangements with builders who then are able to bridge the funding gap that was created during the previous federal administration, when the tax credits were not as valuable as they had been previous to the federal tax cuts. And so we did supply a timetable for a very big project, 96 units at 60% of our average median income and below, right there on Old Lynchburg Road. So right within walkable, bikeable bus route to many, many employment situations. But we did over a 15-year period have the taxes, property taxes that were paid on that property be based upon pre-improvement value. And this gave some extra funding cushion to the builder to be able to then offset his the gap in his bank loans. It's sort of a long story to say that it's working out really well, that particular thing. It does require a lot of sharp pencils and very good performance agreements to make sure that we're getting a really good delivery of services for our taxpayers' money. But those are going to be really great houses for some lucky families who get to live right there. One thing that has been really important to me is identifying the naturally occurring affordable houses, the NOAHs, they call them. And I was shocked, and others at the Planning Commission also were surprised that this was being put in a 10-year out category when I thought it was already underway. And I did raise that issue at the board meeting to say, wait a minute, you know, this needs to be put at the top of the list. How will we ever be able to know if we're making any progress if we don't know where we are right now? And the loss of those one-stories working people's houses, of which we have hundreds in Crozet, in whole neighborhoods, multiple different neighborhoods, that would be a significant blow to our ability to make any progress at all, or to have any place for the next generation to be able to get a stake in a house that doesn't require a 6-month salary for a down payment. I mean, I'm 71, and it was a whole lot easier to buy a house when I was 21 than it is today, because you don't get far with your $1,000 in savings that you did back then. And that's a real burden for all of our young people now. So anyway, I really want to make sure that we're not leaving out the pipeline, and we're also gathering information as we can to the sizes of our neighborhoods, which we have now, many of which were really started in the late 80s, early 90s, and before the data is available from the county. I thank you, Rachel, wherever you are, for the information you shared from the 2007 or 2008 to today for those certificates of occupancy. And Dave Brockman supplied 82 is by right, so not counted as part of the zoning for Ballard Field. So we need to add that up. So it's over 1,800 just in that time frame that we know about. And So it'll be interesting to do some ground truthing on all those. It'll help us understand where we really are across our community. But I do encourage anyone who has other questions or things to share to reach out to me, to talk to each other, to figure out different important, what's most important to each of you, each of our community members in general, and encourage positive advocacy at the Planning Commission for the community so that we can really get the very best solution that we can. I've heard some wonderful suggestions tonight, and I hope everyone will think about these as well with Mike's excellent minutes. So I will stop there, and if anybody has other things to add, I would love to write them down and keep working on this. Thanks.
Thanks, Anne. Joe, you want to say something, and then we can give Matt Helt a turn.
Yeah, just two things that coming out of the meeting based on the most recent draft, both on the prioritization of the capital project. One, I think that phases 2 and 3 of Western Park are still in the future category, which is just really disappointing to see those still 10 years out on a project that, you know, was pitched over 10 years ago and still not built. So I don't know, we got to move that up in the catalyst. Just a thought, and especially given the county's recreational needs assessment, I know that the Western Park is a high priority there, so it seems inconsistent to push that back 10 years. And it's not a $30 million project, you know, it's feasible, it seems. The second thing was at the Board of Supervisors meeting, I forget which supervisor brought it up, but the idea of a recycling center. I was kind of shocked that it wasn't already in there, and that I didn't recall us ever talking about it, because I know it's periodically come up at our meetings. I was kind of shocked that it wasn't already in the draft. And I realized that it's, again, we're at the 11th hour, it's getting late in the day to start just throwing stuff in the draft, but, you know, no.
Oops.
Well, we've lost, losing you again, Joe. Rachel is, yeah, sorry, we lost the last.
Can Joe just take his video off, and would that improve things?
Yeah, I don't know if that's helping at all.
Yeah, go ahead. Just whatever your final thought was.
Yeah, it was about the recycling center. I don't know how far I got in there. It was,
yeah,
I know
yeah,
it's
just
getting late in the day. Maybe just some sort of mention of that this was an idea that helped, you know, so that we may kind of make a note of it. And so if nothing more than 5 years from now, we can actually try to bump it up and have some more robust discussion.
Yeah, I'm not, I mean, good catch. It seems like maybe Rachel, is that something that we could put on that long-term wants?
Yeah, I think it'd be hard for us to like identify a location for it at this stage, because we just wouldn't have the opportunity to.
Yeah, but I mean, I guess what could be on there would be like identifying a space or feasibility for a recycling center would be.
Yeah, that could be a recommendation that we can have.
And yeah, I was also wondering, Rachel, if you can remind me like why Western Park was not a catalyst, those phases.
We use the input from the community, from you all, and from the information we had online to rank those, and it was not as high as all the transportation projects. And just being realistic about what can realistically be funded in the time frame, those future phases didn't necessarily make the cut, but I will definitely caveat and disclaimer that doesn't mean that they can't be funded in the 10-year time frame and that they won't be. It's just the other transportation projects were a higher priority from the community. That's what we felt like we heard.
Thank you. Why don't we let Matt speak, and then Anne, you can have the last word here.
First off, I think everybody's kid should walk into your camera while you're talking at every meeting. Really enjoyed watching all the doors open and your shocked faces before the cameras turned off. Couple things, you know, Crozet was affordable until it was gentrified. You know, that needs to be at the forefront of this master plan. Crozet was walkable before it was gentrified. As a kid, I could walk everywhere from St. George to Crozet Park. I could walk over to Henley, no problems. It's because of the gentrification and the development of Crozet in frankly, a terrible fashion that Crozet is no longer affordable and no longer walkable. And I think the county has repeatedly failed to put a sidewalk in front of Crozet School. And if the county isn't going to do the right thing by putting a sidewalk in front of Crozet School, when they require residential developers and commercial developers to do that exact same thing, I think it's a failure of leadership and an example that the county doesn't actually care about walkability in Crozet. They'll tell you, oh, we built that safe walks to school route. But guess what? They didn't actually do it because they didn't make it past the crosswalk that's dangerous, that dangerous intersection. They didn't connect it to the downtown Crozet because of that 2-foot strip sidewalk is not safe enough. So let's talk about walkability, and let's put that at the forefront of this conversation before more housing is developed. You talk about density increasing walkability. That's great, but look at the most dense developments in Crozet. They're not walkable because there's no sidewalks to them and from them. There's no sidewalks to and from the recreation areas. So if we want to talk about walkability, let's be honest. Cul-de-sacs and developments with dead-end streets, they're not walkable. And that's what the county has primarily approved in this area. There's very few neighborhoods that are actually developed with walkability in mind, and that needs to change. The other thing is retaining walls impede walkability. At a previous meeting, I mentioned how the view is a blight on Crozet. Not because there's too much housing there, and you'd think the geniuses that run the blogs in Charlotte will be able to decipher and maybe visit Crozet. The problem with the view is it's got retaining walls everywhere that cuts it off from the community. That's not walkable development, even though it's high density, and it should be, but it's not because the county approved a terrible site plan. Joe, just so you know, Western Park should have been funded dozens of times. The county not once applied for a state grant to fund recreation. Thankfully, for the first time in 10 years, is my understanding, they applied for a trails grant. First time in 10 years, the county Parks and Rec Department has applied for a trails grant. How is that possible? Every single year they should be applying for parks grants and trails grants. They haven't done it in 10 years. Thankfully, we've got some new staff in the Parks and Rec Department, and hopefully they will apply for those grants. And more importantly, the county needs to be willing to pony up the matching portion. Trails are 80-20. The county didn't even have the 20% part. Parks are 50-50. That park could have been built every year for the last 10 years had the county had any creativity and forethought in the Parks and Recreation Department. And if I'm not mistaken, Ann or someone in the county might be able to go loop back around, but I believe there was a concept for a recycling center like 10 to 20 years ago that, again, the county shot down, or the RWSA or whoever manages it. It was shot down. So maybe that can just be brought back up. But again, 680 kids are going to Crozet Elementary School. The county is refusing to put a sidewalk in front of Crozet Elementary School, even though they require it of all residential and commercial developers. That's an absolute failure, and that should be the first thing that's done with this master plan.
Thanks, Matt. Right, well, Rachel, I know you had some, and do you want to say something? And then we wanted to talk about next meetings for September.
Absolutely. In 2008, in the budget, there was $250,000 for a recycling center, small, containerized, small footprint for downtown to sort of carry forward what Carroll Conley had been doing for 40 years at the lumberyard. And the recession came along, and the majority of members on the board just swept all the buckets for funding, every penny that was found under all the rocks and in the mattresses to keep a reduced local government going, and that has not come back since. I did spend quite a bit of energy trying to find locations, thinking that if that was part of the obstacle, then at least we'd have that squared away. And one of the best ones was over there at the, on 3 Notch at the water treatment plant. But of course, what has happened in the last 10 years gives proof to what Ribana told me then, which was that we have to use that land for our expansion. So sorry. But it was interesting that quite a few Crozet residents did reach out as I was searching for sites and say, let's really put all our energy into a really great recycling center at Ivy because it is pretty close. And then put our second amount of energy into small business collectors who will take things in better capacity to Ivy as opposed to having each of us running all over the place. So this is a really great topic, and I'm sure that it will generate a lot of great discussion. Again, Michael Freitas, who was part of all this in the 2000s, has just retired. So I think he's put 20 years of his work effort into this, and we'll just have to pick it up. But I will stop. Thank you all very much. This is a really helpful discussion. Go for it, Rachel.
Evening, everyone. So I just want to share next steps on both the master plan and then for the CAC. So for the master plan, as if you saw the board meeting, we were directed to proceed to public hearing. So that's the final step in adoption for the plan. And the Planning Commission and the board both will have individual public hearings. So the Planning Commission public hearing is scheduled for September 14th. And then the board is scheduled for October 20th. That board date potentially, I would call it tentative right now, but it will just depend on how the Planning Commission hearing goes and what their recommendation is. And so those are the next master plan steps, and we'll have a final draft posted online for comment. So people can, previously, as we've done, we'll put it online. You can make comments on the draft, and you can email or call, whatever your preferred method is. So I will let you all know when that's up and posted. Separate from the master plan for the CAC, I wanted to share that we're planning for a joint CAC meeting for the month of September. And tentatively, we're looking at the date of September 27th. We are finalizing those details right now, and I will send some communication out, hopefully within a week or so, confirming that date and the time. It will be a virtual meeting via Zoom. And that is all I have.
Real quick, Rachel, was that September 27, you said?
That's correct. Yes, it's a Monday evening. And it'd be 7 p.m. normal meeting start time for that.
What do all of those dates mean for our regularly scheduled, I guess it would be September 8th meeting?
So typically when we have a joint meeting, CACs don't meet their regular monthly meeting. So that meeting would not happen unless there was a need to meet and the committee wanted to have 2 meetings in September. We could accommodate that.
So could the committee just think about having a meeting on Wednesday, the 8th, and then also do the 27th if they thought that was helpful? Very good.
What do you guys think about meeting on the 8th? Yes,
we could wait and see how we do in August. Or is this is August? Never mind. I forget that.
Time flies.
95 degrees all day does my brain. Yes, okay.
Yeah, so this would be, remind me the Planning Commission date again?
September
14th.
The 14th. Okay. I don't know, folks. I got a yes from Joe. I'd love more input. I got a yes from Mark. Does they do? I mean, and Sandy, we had a topic.
Yeah.
You wanna share?
Sure. I think the fundamental problem that Crozet has right now is a political one. I don't know if Ann would agree with me, but we're just outgunned on that board. There's too many people who don't live here and don't really know what's going on and maybe just view us as a bunch of naysayers. And I think, you know, people are nervous about change, but I think we need to do some sort of an analysis of what would happen if Crozet had a governmental system similar to what Scottsville has, where we would control our own planning for the future. Granted, I know Joe has spoken to the risk that, you know, we've got all this new development and then we say farewell to the county. Well, it wouldn't be that simple, but there would be certain tax revenues that we, Crozet, would be entitled to. And there would be, you know, possibly a way for us to have greater control in future of what happens to this community. I feel that the county is too big, it's too populous, it's too diverse to be effectively governed. So anyway, there is a group in Harrisonburg, the Berkeley group, mostly retired, but some still active city planners, people who understand municipalities and taxes, who have agreed that they will take a look at our situation and give us an analysis of what it would look like if we were to have a different relationship with the county. For example, the county would still be in charge of our schools, fine. But, you know, as we look at future planning, we would have control of that. And we would have money, presumably, to oversee our future. So this guy, whose name I've already forgotten, Ally, forgive me, is going to speak to us next month. So, you know, think about your questions for him. If you want to send me stuff in advance that I can forward on to him, I will. But anyway, it should be an interesting meeting.
Well, I have a question you can put on your list if he comes.
Yeah.
Because I know Darren Coffey and a few other people in that organization, but Scottsville has an additional tax levy on top of the county tax levy, and that is where their money comes from. They don't get money from the county. Just so
They don't get
everybody
any money.
knows that. No. We do not put any budget money into government operations in Scottsville except for the parks, the community center park type things, and the and school.
Do you not provide police services as well in the late hours?
They have their own police department. So they do have a manager, very capable young man who was an intern with us a number of years ago, and they have staff, but they pay for that on top of their taxes that they pay to the county. When the Crozet Community Advisory Committee talked about this a number of years ago, I don't remember when, that was really the point of, well, wait a minute, no, I'm not.
Well, let's see the numbers, because as I said, there would be additional revenue that we would be entitled to. So
well, that would be new, but
well, for example, one of the things he mentioned is restaurant tax. I don't know how much that is, how much the county collects from restaurants, but he claimed that would be ours. So I don't know, let him come in and tell us where the money would be coming from, and let's see what it is, you know. I don't think it can hurt, and be nice if we could get out of the city county arrangement. I don't suppose we can do that.
Sean, many have tried.
Yes, I know. That's something to think about. I will say that I talked to Cree Deeds, and he said if this community wanted to split off, he would support us. So just something to pursue.
Sean?
I mean, I don't know if Ann, if you know this off the top of your head, but thinking about Scottsville's situation, you know, I would only imagine that schools is a huge percentage of what their expenditures are. So I don't know how to phrase this, but maybe you'll follow me here, is like, what percent of Scottsville's needs are generated locally versus what the county does contribute? I don't know if you have a broad sense of that.
I don't. I know that for the county, the schools, I think, what is it, 260%, I think, of our overall budget is education. So at least I know the policy is 60% of new revenue is added to the base for the schools, and that gives some predictability for what they can think about doing for the next year. And if there's a reduction, of course, then they have to eat that as well and make sure to make accommodations for that. I'm just trying to do the math in my head about 200 and some million. Go ahead, Ally.
I just wanted to, since it's almost 9 o'clock, I just wanted to quick, before we get into some nitty gritty, which is really what we're proposing we do at another meeting, I wanted to get a quick show of hands. Is everyone in support of meeting September 8th and having, his name is Drew Williams, who Sandy arranged to come next time? I see thumbs. You know, so I guess that's supportive. So we'll go ahead and plan on meeting September 8th. We'll hear from Drew Williams. I'm just going to be very transparent and say I feel slightly awkward having this meeting a week before, you know, these public hearings start about our master plan. But I guess that's, you know, I don't want to we're double down on our reputation of being, I don't know, naysayers. Is that what you said, Sandy? But you know, I guess it's an open. We have the time, and we have somebody who wants to come talk to us. So I'll leave it at that. David and Mark, if you guys have brief, I don't want to run over 9 if we don't need to. So
very brief. All I have to say is, Sandy, make sure that he evaluates the cost of the infrastructure and the assets that the county would hand over to Crozet and what those costs would be.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, are you not going to be here in September, and can you not put that to him?
That's a question that he needs to have time to think about. That's not
Yes.
something he can answer.
Agreed.
Well, and we could also, I don't know, Sandy, but if you're comfortable passing that on, Sandy, or we could go ahead, and if he wants to share his contact with the members ahead of time, just in case he wants more time for questions like that, we could give members that opportunity.
Okay.
I'll get it. That is a fundamental question.
Sure.
It is.
Valerie and Mark, sorry.
Ally, I think your comment about your apprehension, I share it. If our goal is to not appear as naysayers having this meeting just before the public hearings on the master plan take place, I don't think that will help our cause. It's just a poor optics issue. That's my comment. But also, I guess before, I didn't raise my thumb up for this. I'm happy to participate and hear anybody talk about it. I know there's been a lot of discussion about it, but I guess I would suggest that before we do that, that we might have a broader conversation about precisely what our objections are to staying as part of the county. I know there's a lot of aggravation about this middle density housing, but I'm not sure there's a whole lot of other aggravations with the plan. Other than that, yeah, we'd like the park to get funded sooner and you know, some tweaks here or there, but maybe we need to talk more about exactly what the concerns are, objections or frustrations with remaining part of the county other than that. And I don't mean to minimize that as a concern, but it's one element of a very comprehensive, broad plan. And I hate for us to just throw out all the good things about being part of this great county because of frustrations over middle density housing.
I think
and maybe there's lots more that we need to talk about.
I think we've spent the last couple of years talking about our frustrations. Valerie, where have you been? That's what these.
I've been here at every meeting. Every meeting.
Me too.
I would just throw in one thing, and I've been working for 15 years to get the Lick and Hole Bridge funded, and now that we're about to apply for it, this would really sandbag that effort. I'm sorry.
And do you mean having this meeting at all, or just trying to become a, you know, like, I mean, I sort of feel like it depends on how, the media and anybody who happens to tune in spins it, as far as how much, the optics will matter if we have this meeting, so I do wonder, Anne, what if you really would rather us wait, and not to say that we have to, but that's why I wanted to to actually see a show of hands here.
Yeah, I didn't know that there had been a decision to go ahead and arrange for a speaker because that part was really never discussed.
Well, I mean,
I
Sandy
missed
reached
it,
out
that's
to
fine.
me. Sandy reached out to me about it, and we just checked his, and he just said that he was available September 8th. I mean, it's not like it can't be changed.
Yeah, I mean, is there a reason? I mean, if it's bad timing,
I'm
maybe
not
we
sure
just
it is
don't do it on
bad timing,
September.
Ann. Explain that. I mean, here we are saying to the county, look, give us something. You dumped all this population in our community without providing the funding for infrastructure, without funding our schools adequately. You don't think that that's why would they walk away from providing what we're asking for? I think frankly that we've been just too namby-pamby all along. Why do you, I mean, it's not like you're getting your way ever. You're always voted down. Unmute.
Yeah, everybody can unmute and chime in.
Yeah.
Hey, Ally, Mark here.
Go ahead.
So I originally gave you a thumbs up. I'm going to give you a thumbs down on this topic now. I truly believe as members of a board that we've been appointed to by the Board of Supervisors, to hold a public hearing on this topic is not appropriate. I think that if something like this needs to happen, it needs to be a group of citizens outside of a county board, advisory board, where we have all been appointed by the county. And I don't think it's appropriate to have a conversation on breaking off from the county. So I don't agree with hosting this meeting in a public forum. I'm all for the topic outside of that, but not in a public forum right now.
This all sounds pretty undemocratic to me. I mean, are we suggesting the Board of Supervisors are going to punish us for exploring all our options as a group of citizens? This is nuts that we're scared of the Board of Supervisors and their reaction to something that is our God-given right, which is self-determination.
I would also, yeah, I'm going to jump on with Mark and say, I raised my hand because I think we should meet, because we should always meet. We shouldn't just have opportunity to meet, but I think the topic is not appropriate for here. Also, I just point out under our rules of procedure, like the existence of the committee is to assist the county in implementing the master plan and a comprehensive plan for our area. Seceding from the county in no way furthers the master plan or the comprehensive plan.
It's not a secession. It's just a change in the way we work. Maybe
I'm saying that the topic exceeds the authority of our committee, and it is not an appropriate topic for us to discuss under our governing bylaws and documents that are set up. The whole purpose that we're here. Yeah.
Brian?
I just think that at a minimum, we ought to wait till October so that we don't kind of undermine our own efforts.
Does October do it? Or you're
Well,
sure?
it depends on how much work the planning commission might or might not make for Rachel and her team as far as how much time there is until the final vote. But I think, I guess just in Sandy's defense, as far as bringing this forward, I'm not sure it's quite so terrible for our committee to discuss, mostly because we do exist as well to provide a forum, I guess, for these kinds of community issues. And I do hear, this might be a hyperbole, but it feels incessantly from people about this topic. So the idea was that this person would, I mean, the Crozet Gazette did a pretty in-depth article on the becoming of a town a few months ago, but the topic just, percolates like this a lot. And so I entertained the idea as a way to just get some information, not really like it's, again, our committee doesn't vote on stuff or make any decisions. So it's more just that we provide a meeting that, that where the community could hear some more information about how, like, what exactly we're talking about again in this one group's research.
Ally, I may be mistaken, but didn't Rick Randolph raise this question at a planning commission meeting?
That's true. He did. He did, as I recall.
Well, he raised it to change the topic of discussion.
Yeah.
So
well, it just stir the pot
suggest
and he succeeded, obviously.
It was a very clever deflection. I would suggest this would be a great topic for the Crozet Community Association to discuss. And that would be the perfect format to do it, not the CCAC.
I agree, Anne, and I do think that Tim could, I don't think he's here tonight, but I think that, and then the timing isn't quite, personally as a citizen, I still would sort of like to see it pushed back till this plan is done. But that would be up to, to Tim if he's willing to host the meeting. I think that would be.
Tell me who Tim is. I'm fine with going that direction.
Tim Colson is the president of the Community Association.
You send me that information, please, and let's just call this off.
Crozetcommunity.org is, so, but, we can always hear back. I've always thought it would be nice to have sometimes Tim acts this role himself, but sort of a liaison from the community association meetings would be helpful. I know Anne usually goes to those too, but if that meeting happens, it would be nice to hear
Yes.
what
was said. Costas?
We're all, everybody has taken this as we're going to separate. I think there's probably a lot of good reasons and some compelling reasons why we wouldn't want to do it, to include an increase in taxes, the burden that we're going to have. So I think the other thing is everybody presumes that that this would create a situation where we would separate. But I think if we looked at it, as has been some discussion in the past, there are a lot of reasons why we wouldn't want to do it. And those may also come to light. So everybody's just taking a look at this from one perspective. I think there's two sides to it. And it would be beneficial to know so we could put it to rest even.
Thank
because
You're muted now, but yeah, I agree that thank you for making that point as well.
Sorry.
The takeaway from the meeting could be like, whoa, thank gosh, we like that Crozet master plan. Okay, so with that in mind, still meeting on September 8th. I personally do not have an agenda for September 8th. That doesn't mean that one won't come up between now and then. So what do we think about September 8th? Go ahead and keep it on the calendar. We can always cancel it if we don't have anything to talk about.
that seems reasonable. Keep it on the calendar, and if we don't need to have it, we don't have an agenda, we can cancel it. How about that?
I like that plan. Everybody agree? And then maybe Sandy, you can talk to Drew at the Berkeley group and Tim and see if we can move that topic there. And I know I'll tune in.
Okay, sounds good.
I think there was even talk, I don't know now that we're dealing with another wave, but I know Tim was hoping to move in person soon, but that's probably not as likely anymore. But either way, everybody should know about the community association meetings.
That's right.
So anyway, I'll wrap up. It's 9:10. So do we cover everything? Rachel, you good? Okay. My closing remarks. The So our next meeting is tentatively scheduled for September 8th, and then as the joint meeting, September 27th. It will be at 7 p.m. Opportunities for the public to access and participate in the electronic meeting will be posted at a later date in accordance with emergency ordinance number 20-A16 and open meeting requirements of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act. Thanks, everybody. I'll look out for your notes, Valerie, and we'll see you guys sometime soon.